and welcome. If you're totally new here, I'm Kate, and Sewing from Scratch is where I share all types of sewing related content. If that sounds interesting to you, I would love to have you as a subscriber and as a sewing friend. It's totally free, but it helps me reach my goals. Just hit that subscribe button down below or click on my logo down here in the corner and Bob's your uncle. Of other DIY YouTubers for Christina's fall DIY and decor challenge over at the DIY Mommy. If you're here from any of those other videos, I want to extend an extra special welcome and thank you for clicking on my video, because I know there's a slew of awesome videos there to choose from. If my video sounded interesting to you, thank you. Give this video a thumbs up so I know that you are interested in this type of stuff and I will make more. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, I'll leave more information in the description box as well as the links to the other videos that are joined up with this playlist. And it's basically just, it's fun. A whole bunch of YouTubers get together to share their videos together, and it just helps us to get to know one another and to introduce our viewers to other channels that might be of interest to you. So for today's tutorial, let's just say it was definitely a challenge when Christina put out the call for the fall DIY challenge. I knew I wanted to participate because I participated in her spring one, and I will link that below. I did a little bit of a camper refresh on our new camper. So I knew I wanted to join this because that one was so much fun for me, and as a new YouTuber it's always great to get more exposure in my niche. So I knew I wanted to join this challenge, but I could not think of something that I wanted to do for it. You know, typically I sew garments, so home decor, I mean I do sew a lot of home decor, but for Instagram and YouTube it's mostly garment making that I do and different techniques related to that. So for this video, I was like racking my brain trying to think of something, because if I'm gonna post something on YouTube, it's got to be unique, or I have to bring a unique spin to whatever I'm doing. It has to be relatable, like you guys actually have to want to do it and use it, and I have to like it too, because otherwise I'm not sharing something that I don't like. And it also had to be fall themed. So I did have a few different ideas and none of them were perfect until the one day I'm just like sitting there looking at my stuff and I was like, oh, I know, I'm going to make that ugly pot on my china cabinet look pretty. So I decided I was going to create a plant pot cover or basket, and I really have no idea what this is called. And the way that I figured I would incorporate it into fall is by using some plaid fabric and adding in some little touches to my china cabinet to make it really nice and pretty for fall. And this basket is not only decorative and pretty to match your decor, but it's also going to help to save your furniture from water, because there is a water resistant pad at the bottom. This project is also going along with my challenge over on Instagram, which is #ShelfSewingSeptember, and there's still time to enter, so make sure you guys get in there. There are weekly prizes. This week's prize is a Helen's Closet pattern of your choice. Enter on Instagram. The draw will be on Monday. Okay, so what you need is your outer fabric, your cuff fabric, your interfacing, and then for the bottom you definitely need PUL or some sort of water resistant fabric. Then you also want something to absorb moisture as well. So I happen to have this quilted piece in my scrap bin, and it's just 2 pieces of quilting cotton with some Bayani Soft and Stable in the middle, and it's just quilted together quickly. Nobody's gonna see it, so it doesn't have to be pretty. Trust me, I am not a good quilter. I don't have the patience for it. If you don't have something like that, or you don't want it really padded at the bottom, I would recommend something that's going to absorb moisture. Think of it like as if you're making a diaper insert, so you can use like bamboo, micro fleece, you can use terry cloth, and just make sure you have a few layers of that so that it's really going to absorb any leaks that come out of your pot. And then aside from that, all you need is your sewing machine and all the other notions that come along with sewing any project. So the first thing you need to do is measure your pot and you want to measure the circumference, so the circle around the widest part. This tutorial is for a straight cylindrical type of basket. If you wanted it tapered, you would have to do some special measurements to do that. And I do want to mention too that this tutorial can be used for any type of basket. You can use it for kids' toys or put it in your drawer for socks. I'm not going to tell you to do specific measurements, but I will leave the formula down below in the description box as well. So once you have the circumference of your circle, mine was 26 3/4, you need to add 2 seam allowances to that for each end of the fabric because it will be sewn together in a loop. So I used a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I added 26 3/4 plus 1/2 inch plus 1/2 inch again. It gave me 27 3/4, and then you need to measure the height of your pot as well, and mine was 4.5 inches, and then I added a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the bottom where it's going to connect to your circle, and a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top where it's going to connect to your cuff. And if you wanted like a slouchier look, you could make this a lot taller and just use a lighter weight interfacing, and then it would be like slouchy, kind of like a gunny sack or something like that. It would look really neat in the right decor too, like a farmhouse style living room or something like that. So my final measurement ended up being 27 3/4 by 5.5. When I'm cutting, I like to line up on the 1 inch on my cutting mat grid. This really makes an issue sometimes when I forget that I'm 1 inch further out than I need to be. As you can see here, because I cut this an inch shorter than I needed, I ended up having to sew on a little scrap piece at the end. That's going to be the back anyway, and nobody's going to see it, and I didn't feel like cutting a whole new piece out of my main fabric just for that. This fabric is actually from my September makes video, so I will link that down below and maybe somewhere up in the cards so you can see what else I plan to make with this, and I'll definitely be sharing that later, so make sure you're subscribed. I cut mine a little bit smaller than the main piece just because I didn't want it to be so stiff around the seams. And what happened with my interfacing is I didn't have enough, and I really wanted to use this really thick stuff, so I just added separate pieces, and you can see it's kind of wonky. It does not affect the function of this piece. Once you have that cut, you can go ahead and either iron it on or baste it on depending on what kind of interfacing you had. If you don't have interfacing, you could also just use like various layers of something thicker or go for a slouchy look. Try this with knit fabric and make it a slouchy look. I think it would turn out really cute too. Your cuff piece is going to be the exact same length as your main piece. You can make it as wide or as narrow as you want. So mine ended up being 2.5 inches, 1/2 inch for the seam allowance, and then a 2 inch depth, but the hem also came off of that. Mine ended up being about 1/2 inch for the hem, so I have about a 1.5 inch cuff. And for your cuff fabric, you can use just a coordinating piece of fabric or the same fabric, or you don't even have to do a cuff. You would just have to then add hem allowance on the top to go around and make it a nice finished edge. And I'm just using a nice basic piece of muslin for that. I really like the look of raw muslin. So now for your bottom piece, you need the circumference of your circle. So in my case, 26 3/4. And all I did here is just made my measuring tape in a loop and then set it on my piece and traced around it. And this is definitely not technical. It was definitely not a perfect circle. If you really wanted a perfect circle, you could make a center point and then figure out the diameter and go across, or the radius, and keep your point straight and then go around like you would with a compass. When you trace out your circle to the circumference, make sure that you add your seam allowance onto that around the outside. So I use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you can see I have a circle there that is the circumference of my pot, plus then I have the 1/2 inch circle around it. I'm going to cut around on the 1/2 inch outer circle, and I do recommend marking that the original circle, the circumference of your pot circle, on the fabric piece that you want to be right side up, because you're going to use that as a guide when you're sewing everything together. So you need, for the bottom, you need your PUL or your waterproof layer, and then you also need your absorbent layer. So in my case, I use this quilting piece. And stay tuned to the end because I give you another option if you don't want to do the whole basket idea. So fall is kind of the time where you might be bringing in plants from outside, and they might just be in like a terracotta plant pot or something that doesn't really go with your decor. So this is a perfect way to spruce that up and make it look nice for fall. So once you have your pieces cut, the next thing you're going to do is baste some pieces together. So you want to baste all of your absorbent pieces with the PUL piece, and when I say baste, I just mean run a straight stitch all the way around, but making sure that you're within the seam allowance. All right, and then once you have that done, you also want to hem your cuff. So hem the one edge, and I just folded it over 1/4 inch here and pinned it, and then when I was sewing it, I folded it again that same 1/4 inch and then sewed it all the way through just to hem it. Make sure you're following me on Instagram. I usually share on there sneak peeks or even like full shots of what I've made before it goes live on YouTube. Okay, so now it's time to sew your cuff to your main piece, and you're going to sew them, the right side of your cuff is to the wrong side of your main fabric, and then sew that all the way down so that when you flip it over, the cuff hem is right side out and your seam is concealed. You could alternatively do the hem after so that you don't get this mixed up like I did. And then once you have that done, I recommend trimming your seam and pressing it down, as well as understitching the seam allowance to the main piece. When I say understitching, all I mean is you're only taking the seam allowance and one side of the fabric, the underside of the fabric, so that the seam allowance stays nice to the main fabric, but then the cuff covers it all and it doesn't have any stitch marks on it at all. So now it gets kind of tricky. You need your main fabric to be right sides together so that the seam is on the inside, but for the cuff piece, you also want your fabric to be right sides together, but it's not the same as the cuff because the right sides don't line up because of the way we sewed it. So what I did was, well, initially I sewed it all right sides together, and that didn't work out because then I had the seam for the cuff on the outside when I flipped it over. So then what I recommend doing is sew your cuff right sides together first, making sure you go all the way down and a little bit into the main fabric, and then stop and turn it around and do your main piece right sides together. Just make sure that that direction change is under your cuff. All right, now we're gonna attach it to the circle. So what you wanna do here is put your circle and your loop right sides together and make sure that you're pinning along the edge, and make sure that you can see where that circumference mark is. So that's where you're gonna be sewing all the way around. That's the size that you want this to be in the end. This can be kind of tricky. Try and kind of stuff your circle inside your loop if you can. It's gonna take a little bit of patience, but it's really not that bad in the end. All right, and then you can trim your seam allowance and any threads that are sticking out, remove any basting stitches that need to be removed that are showing, and style your pot. So I really like the way this turned out. I am super happy with the plaid, and it seems really fall-like to me, and I just love how it added some character and warmth to my china cabinet. This is where I keep all my prized trinkets. They're kind of, I mean, they're there and I love them and I can go look at them when I want, but they're also out of the way from the kids and from dust. It doesn't look cluttered in my house, so I really like having this here, even though china cabinets, I mean, are they kind of like old lady-ish? I don't know. I'm kind of an old lady at heart, so I'm an old lady. And yes, you guys, I am a terrible plant mom. Look at this. I thought about like finding some other plants and fixing this so it didn't look like I have dead plants. Then I was like, no, I'm gonna be real here because I need some advice. So please, if you are a bad plant mom, give this video a thumbs up. If you know of how I can be a better plant mom to my succulents, leave me a comment because I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I really don't. I have 3 pots of succulents and they all look like this. Some of them are doing okay, and then the rest are like totally 100% dead. And I think I was maybe overwatering them. The advice I had was to like soak your pot, like totally soak the dirt and then let it drain out. But I really think that was bad for my plants. It's also, we also use soft water. So is that the reason I'm having trouble? Let me know. If you just want to do kind of like a placemat to save your furniture, I had another one of these quilted pieces, and what I did here was I took the circumference of my pot and I divided that by 2, and that was the diameter I used to make my circle, and I just used one point in the center and then I did a straight line across in various spots and then connected the points to make a circle. And I just added PUL to the bottom with a simple stitch close to the edge, and then I added bias binding around the edge. And I am no expert on bias binding, you guys. I am still practicing on this. I don't love bindings, but there's only one way to get better. And here's how it turned out. And you could definitely make your own bias binding. This is something I had on hand and I didn't feel like making any, but I will link my bias binding makers down below in the description box. They're on Amazon. So thanks so much for watching, especially if you stayed to the end and are listening to me ramble on still now. I really do appreciate it, and I would really love if you hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up if you really liked it and want to see more types of home decor stuff and not just garment making, and leave me a comment. I want to hear, what else would you use this basket for? Are you a bad plant mom? Tell me. I need to know. I need to know how to raise succulents because I love indoor plants and I am just terrible at it. Every indoor plant I have killed. I can grow anything outside. Oh yeah, I have a flourishing garden outside, not inside. Not in the house. I don't know. I'd also love for you to follow me on Instagram. As I mentioned before, I share a lot on there, and you don't want to miss out on Shelf Sewing September because there's a couple great prize packs left. See you next time.